to discuss something that's been on my mind over the past few weeks, and I think it's something that's it's a little bit of a change in mindset. And it's something that if you just look at different discussions within Torah and Chazal, Gemara in general, I think it's more than what we generally think Torah is about. I think that it has more of a focus on what I'm about to speak about. So just starting off, we're going to go into a little bit of Parsha, and then we'll move on to more of the focus of the idea that I want to speak about. To start off, there's a famous Mishnah that everyone knows, and it's a negative Mishnah. And what I mean by negative is not that it's bad, but rather that it speaks in a negative tone. It says what you shouldn't do, but it doesn't really explain what you should do, which kind of makes it difficult to accomplish what the Mishnah has to say. So the Mishnah that you all know in Masechet Avot, it says Antikinos Ish Socho says as follows. He says, Al tiyu ka'avadim hamishamshim et harav amanan lekabel pras. Your Jews, the way we worship, the way we live our lives, should not be in a way that every action that we do is in order to get reward. It's not for you getting benefit. It's not when we serve God. The goal of serving God is not to get benefit. Rather, it's to not get benefit. That's what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says, do not be like a servant who just serves his master in order to get benefit. Rather, don't be like a servant who does things to get benefit. Now, what it doesn't say is, okay, so what should we be? We know we're not supposed to be like a servant, and even repeats it, it says you're not supposed to be like a servant. Great. But what are we supposed to be like? What is the goal? What is the mindset that we're supposed to have? If it's not for reward, if the reason why we serve God is not for reward and punishment, then what should we be thinking about? What is our role? What's our attitude towards Avodas Hashem? So I'm going to take that question, I'm going to put it on the side, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. But first, I want to take a look at this week's Parsha. I say this week's, I mean both Truma and Tesaveh, which discuss the Binyan of the Mishkan. Now we know that the Mishkan, God says that He wants us to build a Mishkan. He uses the famous line of building a Mishkan, V'shachanti b'tocham, and I will dwell among you. The goal is not for necessarily to be in the Mishkan. It's not necessarily a house for God, because it's cold outside, but rather in order to have God dwell among us. That's the goal. We want God to be among us, and that's something that a lot of times I'm sure everyone's thought about, which in terms of it seems like God is this being that I can't connect to, that's in the sky, that's so different than I am. How in the world am I able to have a relationship with God? And the answer is that's exactly the goal of what the Torah is trying to create, is create a real, tangible relationship with God through the means of the Mishkan, Torah, mitzvahs, etc. How that's accomplished is obviously a much bigger conversation, but that's what we want to create. We want to create a reality where we don't have that question. We don't think, oh, how am I supposed to connect to God, but rather we actually feel that real connection through the Mishkan. Now, what's interesting is that what it says by the Mishkan is that until the Mishkan happened, God's will of the way the world should be was not yet accomplished. And this is in source number 3. It says as follows. B'yom Rishon. Everyone can look in Bamidbar Rabbah, source number 3. Amar Rav Shimon bar Abba. Ma'u B'yom Rishon. Why does it say when they finish building the Mishkan it's called B'yom Rishon? Min Hayom Rishon. From the first day of creation, Shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu et ha'olam, what did God want? For the first day He created the world, Nit'ava ladur im briotav v'tachtonim. His goal, what He was looking for, what God wanted from the first day was to have a real, tangible connection to us, ladur im briotav, to live with His creations in this world. What does that mean? What does that mean to live in this world? It seems kind of strange. And then He comes and says it didn't happen. He says to Adam Rishon to keep the mitzvot, Adam Rishon doesn't keep the mitzvot. When does it actually happen? The next part that's bold, Kevan shu kama mishnah, Ve'ishra bo HaKadosh Baruch Hu shchinato u'ba'u nesi'im la'akriv, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu ichatev shebayom ze nivra ha'olam. He says, from the moment that we built the Mishkan, and finally the Nesi'im brought korbanot, and we started to serve God in the Mishkan, God said, now this is creation. Creation was accomplished not when God said, let there be light, but rather through us creating the Mishkan, us bringing korbanot, and in reality we see that there's some sort of partnership between us and God as creating the world into a place where God is able to, as the Midrash calls it, ledur b'tachtonim, to live within the world. Now obviously it doesn't mean in a physical sense that God is physically in the world, but I think it means in a real sense, where we feel that this place can be a place that is fit for connecting to God. And that's our job. God wants this world to be not something distant from God, rather, like every one of His other creations, is something that is a vehicle to connect to God. And the problem is in life, we don't feel that. And we don't necessarily see how everything in the world is really created for that purpose. And that really everything in the world is a creation of God. Now, but what we do see from this Midrash is that the mission of creating, of making this world, of finishing and accomplishing creation, is not necessarily only up to God, but also up to us. And we see that in the last two parashiyot. Okay, we see in Parshat Truma, as we just said, that once we built the Mishkan, that's when God said, I can dwell among you. We also see it, if you look at source number 5, we see that the Gemara says as follows. Anybody, lomar lacha, where it's bolded, kol dayan shedan din emet lamito, afilu sha'a achat, ma'aleh lav hakatuv, ki'ilu naseh shutaf l'kadosh baruch hu b'maaseh breshit. Any judge that judges correctly, truthfully, in a truthful way, it's as if he is a partner in the creation with God. Now why does that make him a partner? It's because God, when He created the world, there's a purpose to the world. The world was not just created as a surface, as a stage where we're supposed to just play. Rather, it was created for a purpose. And if we accomplish that purpose, if we make the world into a more just place, and you judge people based off of just laws, emet lamito, you become a partner with God. When you make the world into a vehicle for a service of God, for making the world a more divine place, a better place, again like in the Mishkan, you make the world into what the world was supposed to be from creation, and you become like a partner in creation of the world. Now, the next part, there's a Gemara Masechet Brachot that the Mesilas Yesharim speaks about. Everyone knows the Mesilas Yesharim, everyone knows, is a book about how to become a perfect Jew. And that's the Mesilas Yesharim. He goes through different levels, different stages, of becoming somebody who is always thinking about what's correct. And the end of the book, by the way, his answer, what's the perfect Jew, is an answer of, there is steps that everybody should take, but at the end of the day, it's a very individual thing. It's a very interesting sefer. But in the middle, he has, or towards the end, he has a section on what we call Chassidut. Okay, Chassidut, not in the what we call Chassidim, or meaning the Chassidic movement, but rather it's a section on the level of worship of God called Chassidut. Now, what is this level? So he says it's when a person has a mindset. This is found in source number 7. When the mindset of a person is not one of, I'm doing this to get reward, I'm doing this for my own self-improvement, which he says is not a bad thing. And he explicitly says it's not. I wouldn't say that that's wrong, but rather it's not the highest level. What's the highest level? When the focus of your life is one of caring about the fact that the world is not the way it should be. That you care that the world is not a world which is ready to be just. The world, there's evil in the world. That you don't see Am Yisrael is not in the place that they should be. That the values of the Torah are not what the world sees as valuable. That's something that bothers you. A person who lives their life trying to make the world into a better place, a place which is more holy, more sanctified, closer to Torah values, that's a person who is a chassid. A chassid is living his life not for self-gain, but rather for the betterment of everything. And I think that just in terms of mindset, a lot of times we think that if we focus on how the Torah can help me become a better person, how the Torah can make me into more caring, how the mitzvahs affect me, then we're going to be able to have the right mindset to be very much into mitzvah and committed to mitzvahs, because I get so much out of it. But at the end of the day, sometimes that just doesn't work, because unfortunately the world doesn't work that way, where I do a mitzvah and I feel like, wow, I became a better person. Where I learned some Gemara and I'm like, wow, I really have a better perspective on life, and really I'm ready to tackle the difficulties of living in the world. It doesn't work that way. And eventually, I believe that long term, all those things do happen. But in order to live a life, we are totally committed. I think the aspect that the Ramchal and the Gemaras that we just saw are referring to, I think that attitude is very, very powerful. An attitude is, I have a mission. I have an ideology. I have something that I believe in. And because I believe in something, that's why I wake up every morning and I say, I'm going to live my life as a Jew, because I know that this mission is to make the world into a better place. And slowly, if I do it, and I influence others, and others do it, we create a society which is so much better. It could be that every time I read a piece of Gemara, I don't feel like, wow, I know exactly how to live my life better, and this is so relevant to every moment of my life. Maybe not, but I think as a whole, I feel that my mission is the mission of being a partner in God in creation of the world. And being a partner with God in the creation of the world means making the world a more just place. It means making the world a more divine place. It means caring about the Jewish people, which are the chosen people, to bring values of Torah and God's will to the world. I think that all those things are part of my life and make it a mission that I wake up in the morning and I try to accomplish. What happens when you have this mission is eventually become a person that's affected by this mission. And the mission works so well in order to incorporate into your life and make you into a better person, that it's better than if you were just focusing on making yourself into a better person from the first place. It works much stronger. And I think that's the perspective that a lot of times, if you look at Torah in general, there's very little focus of how the Torah improves you. Rather, a lot of the focus of Torah, and the vast majority, is how the Torah affects the world. And if we live our lives with that mindset of how does the Torah accomplish God's will and accomplish the mission of making this world into a better place, I think that's going to create an internal commitment in all of us, make us so much more committed to the ideals of the Torah. Now, just to end, there's an interesting idea brought in Rav Kook's Sefer on the back page. It's translated also in English. When was the Torah given? On what day was the Torah given? What day was the Torah given? Anyway, on Shavuos. So Shavuos is definitely the wrong answer. The Torah was definitely not given on Shavuos. According to every opinion, it was not Shavuos. And I agree, I would assume that it's Shavuos because it's called Chag Matan Toratenu, the holiday of getting the Torah. So you would assume that we got the Torah on that day. But unfortunately we didn't. And it's kind of strange, and we'll have a talk about why that is. Maybe we'll mark it right before Shavuos, and we'll talk about why it is that we did not get the Torah on Shavuos, but it's still called Chag Matan Toratenu. But we got the Torah in any case on the 51st day after the Omer. According to all opinions, the 51st day after Yetziat Mitzrayim, 51st day of the Omer, we got the Torah. Now there's an argument in Chazal whether or not that was the 6th day of Sivan, or whether or not it was the 7th day of Sivan. It's a machloket between Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanu. So, but Rav Kook takes this machloket, which seems to be, and it seems in the Gemara Masechet Shabbos, it's a very technical machloket. And he comes and says that this is it's a very ideological argument. One opinion says, Rabbanan say we got it on the 6th day, Rav Yossi says we got it on the 7th day. Now what's the ideological argument that goes on behind this, what seems like, who cares? What do you mean? We got it. Does it matter whether or not we got it on the 6th day or the 7th day? So why are they arguing about it? It says because each one wants to present their understanding of Torah. What happened on the 6th day? The 6th day of creation. What happened? What was created? Man. Was the Torah given on the 6th day, which means that it's given for man? It was given for man to perfect himself. Or was the Torah given on the 7th day? What happened on the 7th day? Shabbos. Shabbos is the time when all of creation was elevated to a point where there's a place which is closer to God. That's what Shabbos represents, the elevation of the world and the betterment of the world. And the machloket between Rav Yossi and the Rabbanan is, what is the goal of Torah? Is the Torah a 6-day thing, or is it a 7th-day thing? Is it a thing about embetterment of the individual, embetterment of yourself? Is that what the purpose of Torah is? Or is the purpose of Torah the embetterment of the world, making the world a better place, and having a mission, as we spoke about? And that's their machloket. What is Torah all about? And Rav Kook ends by saying that they're not really, in the end of the day, they're not really arguing. Because both of these aspects can live in harmony. And I think that the idea is that if a person notices that being in a mission and focusing their life on something that's bigger than them, an ideology, and living that ideology makes you into a person who is focused on something that's bigger than themselves, automatically becomes a 6-day thing. In other words, makes you into a better person. And both of those things together create an all-encompassing life. A life where you're focused on things that are beyond yourself, because if I'm just for myself, then at the end of the day, you're nothing. But at the end of the day, if you focus on things that are bigger, then you become something. You become something so much bigger. I think that in terms of just this atmosphere, we're all people that involved in one way or another in Bnei Akiva, and I think that the Bnei Akiva and the youth movement in general, the goal of it is to become somebody who lives for something bigger than themselves, who lives a mission, who lives not just because, goes from day to day and enjoys, and doesn't, no one really at the end of the day comes because they only enjoy the pulot, or they enjoy the chips or the apple cider. Everyone comes to Bnei Akiva and lives Bnei Akiva because we believe in something more. We believe in something that's bigger than us, and we want to accomplish it. We want to accomplish what it means to be a nation in its own land. We want to accomplish what it means to have ideologies of Torah v'Avodah, of a Torah that's not just for the Beis Midrash, but a Torah that encompasses all of life. And all of these things are things that we believe in, and that we want to push forward, and we want to live, and we want to influence the world to become a better place because of that. And so I think that the more we realize that, the more devoted we become, and just this is, obviously I'm preaching to the choir, this is more of a sikha of chizuk for all that we're doing here. And have a good night.